The Dark Interval, Letters for the Grieving Heart, by Maria Rilke. To Adelheid Francisca van de Marwitz. Adelheid Francisca van de Marwitz, born 1894, died 1944, was the sister of the German poet Bernard von de Marwitz, who died during World War I, and had maintained a correspondence with Rilke. Her brother's frequent recitations of Rilke's poetry introduced her to the literary culture of her time. A dedication in a book that he gave to his sister before his death quotes a poem from Rilke's The Book of Images. January 14th, 1919, Munich. My dear and honored Miss, only illness could excuse a silence of the kind that I have now observed against you for months, and I would like to assure you that I am ill. If I think how much any sort of communication exceeds my strengths, even with people toward whom I feel as much of a motivation and motive to write, such as you. While speaking, I occasionally still get over the inhibitions that invaded my most immediate nature during the devastation of these horrific years. When actually facing another human being, I gather myself for his sake, perhaps drawing a bit on his strength. But when I am supposed to approach someone with my pen, I grow tired, as if in deep sand. And yet, the fact that Christmas would have passed without even the smallest sign of my thoughts for you on its way, I would hardly have thought possible. And I have now also failed in this instance, for the time passed with all of its external pressures and the many demands that I did not meet. But I assure you that during the few moments of more solemn and somewhat festive contemplation that the presence of a Christmas tree always prompts in me, my recollections did not just fleetingly touch upon you, but I have truly thought of you, have gathered my thoughts near you, and my thinking has, let me be precise, been able to come to rest near you. And there was a moment when I was filled with the determination that we would soon be granted an actual meeting in person, where we could really speak to one another, which would allow me to make up for the sin of my silence. I ultimately did not live in the rooms with the expansive park views that your brother had intended for me to inhabit, in a vivid gesture of true friendship. But it is nonetheless not at all strange for me to think of Friedersdorf, which somehow has become familiar through my young and dear friend's desire to host me there sometime. I'd like to imagine that I do not need to guess, but that I can rely on a feeling of unerring certainty in thinking of the house to which I am now all the more demonstrably connected by the strength of his beautiful and beautifully chosen endowment. I have to assume that all of my belongings in Paris have been lost, but now, since I have a few rooms of my own here, a new collection of books is gradually starting to grow. Among its most supreme foundations is the beautiful edition of the Odes by Paul Claudel. It connects me to things I had to forego forever, but that are also unspeakably impossible to lose by nature. To the friend who gives himself again and again through these books, and to Paris, which remains so intricately transformative in my life. Whether the poet Verhaeren was one of the authors whom Bernard von Marwitz especially admired, and whether he read to you from his books during the evenings in Friedersdorf, This great poet, who was so gruesomely killed during the war at the Rhone train station, was also a wonderful and great friend to me. I will tell you about him one day, how he was able to increasingly direct all of the force and effort that human beings apply to God back to those humans in whom he had such faith, expectation, and radiant joy. In fact, he thought of redirecting in this way the faith of a great and powerful believer. He was such an insurmountable friend precisely because of this direct and radiant faith in human beings. He suspected that every person could be capable of being the most pure and most magnificent. And he was blissfully willing to do nothing so much as to admire. I lost with him this great man, the individual who knew how to most insistently encourage me to meet my obligations. Even though he could never read a line of my writings, he believed in them with boisterous optimism. And I knew he thought me capable of exactly that which would be my innermost joy to achieve. I recall all of this with particularly deep emotion, since I now hold in my hands his final book, Les Flammes Hautes, 1917. I have been reading aloud from it for the past 3 days, almost without interruption. If you could only be here with me so I could share with you the happiness of these great poems, they would let you realize what we all now need most urgently. That transience is not separation. For we, transient as we are, have it in common with those who have left us, and they and we are at once united in one being, in which separation is just as unthinkable. Would we otherwise be able to understand such poems if they were only the statements of a future dead person? Don't they address inside of us, besides the present conditions, also continually something unlimited and unrecognizable? Yes. I think that the spirit cannot make itself so small that it concerns nothing but our existence in the here and now. Where it rushes toward us, we are both the living and the dead. I realize only now to what extent the contributions I assembled for the yearbook, an anthology edited by Rilke's publisher, all serve this conviction, which has been confirmed me via experience. A prose piece by Rilke, recounted as precisely as possible, and to which I also allude in the grotesque poem Death. The person leaning against the tree became, so to speak, the more expressive marker of the scale, collaborating between life and death. It is an image I cannot use without remembering how Romain Rolland once played for me a small musical fragment which came, he assured me, from antiquity, and that was nothing but a gravestone inscription in notes. Before I knew back then what this music was meant to express, I described to him that it gave me the sensation of the movement of 2 pans of a single scale, quietly settling into equilibrium. And I nearly shuddered with joy when he confessed that it was an epitaphium that had been carved on a stele, dating to the 5th century before Christ. But the peculiar experience of the person leaning into the tree, which is hard to describe, means to me, I almost want to say, the natural induction into an even deeper and more invisibly grasped balance, for which the image of a scale is no longer needed. This gentle, mere presence of a human being of someone alive on the other side of death is like the magical situation in the Greek poem where two lovers trade outfits and join in an embrace, now confused and confounded in each other's clothing and warmth. It constitutes a quiet and loving exchange of what is external, while the blissful hesitation of the modulation is close to becoming purest certainty. The poem Death finally conjures up the moment when, while I was standing one night on the beautiful bridge in Toledo, a shooting star, which fell through outer space in a taut and slow curve, passed at the same time, how shall I put this, through inner space. The dividing contour of the body was no longer there. And just as sight had done in this case, at an earlier time my hearing had announced to me this unity. Once, on Capri, while I was standing under the olive trees in the garden one night, a bird call that forced me to close my eyes was at once inside of me and outside, as if in a single, undivided space of absolute extension and clarity. Since I have now told you all of this, may I also send you the almanac, a sample of new writings, published by Incel. Even the beautiful poem by Countess Anna de Noailles will now, with the awareness of those connections, not seem random to you. And allow me the pleasure of recommending some books to you in the future, and of occasionally sending you one that I like. Verhaaren's Vlaams Haute, for example, as soon as I receive more copies. It's still slow and complicated with French books. Yours, Rilke. The letter itself ends here, but I've decided to read the poem Death that Rilke was referring to when writing his friend. Death by Maria Rilke. Come thou last one, whom I recognize, unbearable pain through this body's fabric, as I, in my spirit burned, see, I now burn in thee. The wood that long resisted the advancing flames, which thou kept flaring, I now am nourishing, and burn in thee. My gentle and mild being, through thy ruthless fury, has turned into a raging hell that is not from here, quite pure, quite free of future planning. I mounted the tangled funeral pyre, built for my suffering, so sure of nothing more to buy for future needs, while in my heart the stored reserves kept silent. Is it still I, who there past all recognition burn? Memories I do not seize and bring inside. Oh, life, oh, living, oh, to be outside, and I in flames, and no one here knows me.